The princess fled the burning palace, carrying her babies into the night. The soft flicker of light from the tall windows seemed different tonight, as if the shadows themselves were restless. Her babies, nestled beside her, murmured softly in their sleep. She gently stroked their tiny heads, trying to soothe them. Then she heard it, a faint crackling that didn't belong to the usual palace noises. Alara sat up, her heart beating faster. She rose carefully, listening. The crackling grew louder, accompanied by a strange, warm smell that filled the air. Smoke curled at the edges of the curtains, whispering across the walls. Panic tried to take hold, but she forced herself to stay calm. Her children were safe in her arms, and that was all that mattered. "Stay close to me," she whispered, her voice trembling but steady. She wrapped them tightly in a soft blanket and moved toward the door. The grand halls of the palace had always been her playground, filled with laughter and light, but now they were shadows of themselves, distorted and threatening. She could see the glimmer of flames reflecting on the polished floors from the cracks in the walls. The fire was spreading faster than she imagined. She remembered the hidden corridors, paths known only to the royal family. With practiced steps, she guided her children through the maze of hallways. The fire's heat licked at the doors and walls, but Alara did not stop. She could hear distant alarms, mechanical voices warning of danger, but she did not pause. Each step brought her closer to safety, each breath a reminder that she had to protect her children. Smoke thickened, making it hard to see. Her children stirred, coughing softly, and she pressed them closer. The air tasted bitter, and Alara felt the first pangs of fear, but she pushed it aside. She focused only on movement, on reaching the palace gates before the flames could block her path. The palace she had known all her life, a place of beauty and memories, was transforming into something foreign and dangerous. Every door she passed seemed to burn with a memory, and yet she moved forward, refusing to look back. Outside, the city was a canvas of light and shadow. Drones hovered silently in the sky, scanning for survivors, their bright beams cutting through the smoke. Alara's heart skipped a beat. She had to be invisible to remain unnoticed, at least until she could find safety. She moved quickly, avoiding the main streets, slipping through side alleys that twisted between towers and walls. The night was her ally now, hiding her from the prying eyes above. The babies cried softly, sensing the fear in their mother, and Alara hummed a gentle tune, a lullaby that had been passed down through generations. The sound was small and fragile against the roar of the fire and the hum of the city, but it gave her courage. She whispered promises of safety, of brighter days, into their ears, each word a shield against despair. Eventually, she reached the edge of the palace grounds. The fire had not yet touched the outer walls, but it was close, and she knew she had little time. Her eyes scanned the surrounding streets for a safe route, a way out of the city entirely. A narrow canal ran along the edge, its waters shimmering under the moonlight. It offered a path that the drones might overlook. Without hesitation, she descended toward it, carefully balancing her children in her arms. The water was cool against her feet, and the sound of it rushing over stones and metal was strangely comforting. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe. They were still alive, and she could feel their tiny hearts beating against her chest. That heartbeat, so small and fragile, was her purpose now. Each step she took was for them, for their safety, and for the hope of a future beyond the fire. As they moved through the night, Alara glimpsed the first hints of dawn on the horizon. The sky was painted in gentle shades of pink and orange, a promise that the darkness, no matter how intense, would eventually give way to light. She smiled softly, feeling a spark of determination. She did not know what awaited them beyond the city or how long they would be safe, but she knew one thing: she would never stop moving, never stop protecting her children. The palace behind them burned, a reminder of all that had been lost. But ahead, the night stretched into possibility, and Alara, carrying her children into the unknown, felt the first glimmer of hope. She would find safety, and one day she would rebuild. For now, each step into the night was an act of courage, a testament to the strength of a mother and the enduring spirit of humanity. The night air felt heavy as Princess Alara moved away from the burning palace. The glow of fire behind her painted the sky in shades of red and gold, but she did not turn to look again. Her arms ached from holding her babies so tightly, yet she welcomed the pain. It reminded her they were still alive. Every breath she took was careful, measured, as if the wrong sound might draw danger toward them. The narrow canal guided her forward, its dark water reflecting broken lights from the city towers. Alara stepped slowly, keeping her balance as the ground shifted beneath her feet. The city was not silent, but it was empty. Emergency signals echoed in the distance, and warning lights blinked on tall buildings, yet no people appeared. The evacuation must have been rushed. She wondered how many had escaped and how many were still trapped. The thought made her chest tighten, but she pushed it aside. Right now, her only duty was to move forward. Her children stirred again, small hands gripping her clothing. She paused beneath a bridge and checked their faces in the faint light. Their eyes were open, wide and confused, but they were not crying. Alara whispered softly, telling them they were brave, telling them the night was watching over them. Her voice steadied her own shaking heart. She could not afford fear. Fear would slow her, and slowness could cost them everything. Above her, a low hum passed through the air. Alara froze. A patrol drone glided between the buildings, its scanning light sweeping across the streets. She pressed herself into the shadow of the bridge, holding her breath. The babies sensed her tension and went still, as if they understood the danger. Seconds stretched into long, silent moments. Then the drone moved on, unaware of the small family hidden below. When the sound faded, Alara continued, her steps quicker now. She reached the edge of the canal where it opened into an old maintenance path, one that had been forgotten by most of the city. She remembered it from childhood lessons, taught as part of palace safety training. At the time it had seemed unnecessary, a relic of old fears. Now it was her lifeline. The path led underground, away from the towering lights and into cool darkness. The air smelled of metal and earth, but it was clean, free of smoke. Alara felt her shoulders relax for the first time since waking. She followed the path carefully, guided by dim floor lights that still functioned despite the chaos above. Each step took her farther from the fire, farther from the palace, and deeper into uncertainty. After some time, she heard voices ahead. Alara stopped, her heart racing again. She considered turning back, but the memory of flames pushed her forward. She stepped into a wider chamber and saw a small group of people gathered around a portable light source. They wore simple clothes, marked with symbols of old engineering guilds. Their faces showed surprise, then recognition. One of them stepped forward slowly. He lowered his hands to show he meant no harm. His voice was calm as he spoke her name, not loudly but with respect. Alara tightened her hold on her children, unsure whether to trust them. But there was no hostility in their eyes, only concern and caution. The group offered water and warmth. Alara hesitated, then accepted. Her body realized how tired she was only when she sat down. The babies drank from small nutrient packs provided by the engineers, their cries finally breaking free. Alara felt tears rise, but she did not let them fall. She listened instead as the group explained they had been living beneath the city for years, avoiding political struggles above. They spoke of unrest, of power shifting in secret, of warnings ignored. The fire, they believed, was not an accident. Alara felt a cold weight settle in her chest. She had feared this truth, yet hearing it made everything sharper, clearer. Someone wanted the royal family gone. Someone had planned this night carefully. Still, there was no anger in her, only resolve. She thanked the group and asked for a place to rest. They guided her to a quiet corner where old blankets were stacked neatly. Alara lay down, her children curled against her. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel exhaustion. Her eyes closed, but her mind remained alert, listening to every sound. Soft light filtered into the underground chamber when Princess Alara woke. For a moment, she did not remember where she was. Then the quiet hum of machines and the steady breathing of her children brought everything back. The palace, the fire, the escape. She tightened her arms around the babies, feeling relief wash through her when they stirred gently and looked up at her with calm eyes. The engineers moved quietly nearby, speaking in low voices. They respected her rest, and that kindness stayed with her. Alara rose slowly, careful not to disturb the children. Her body felt heavy, but her mind was clear. Rest had given her strength, and she knew she would need it. The world she had known was gone, and the one ahead was uncertain. One of the engineers approached and offered her warm food. Alara accepted with gratitude. As she ate, she listened. The group spoke openly now, trusting her presence. They talked about the city systems, about power failures spreading as the fire damaged key control centers. Transport lines were being locked down. Surveillance was increasing. Whoever had planned the palace fire was tightening their grip. Alara asked careful questions. She did not speak as a princess demanding answers, but as a mother seeking safety. The engineers responded in kind. They explained that the underground paths connected far beyond the city, reaching old launch zones once used for early space travel. Most had been abandoned, but not all. A small transport shuttle still existed, hidden and functional though rarely used. The idea stayed with her. Leaving the planet had never crossed her mind before. Her duty had always been here. But now, with her children so small and vulnerable, duty meant survival. Staying would put them in constant danger. Leaving might give them a future. Later, Alara walked with one of the engineers through a narrow tunnel. Old screens flickered to life as they passed, displaying maps and data streams. She studied them closely, committing routes and details to memory. She had been trained in leadership, in diplomacy and planning. Those lessons returned to her now, sharper than ever. They reached a reinforced door marked with faded symbols. Beyond it lay the shuttle bay. The craft was smaller than she expected, compact and worn, but solid. Its surface bore signs of age, yet the structure was strong. Alara placed a hand against its hull and felt something steady within it, like a promise. The engineer explained the risks. The shuttle could travel far, but its systems were basic. Navigation would require skill. Supplies were limited. And if they were detected during launch, questions would be asked. Alara listened without interruption. When he finished, she nodded. She had already made her decision. That night, preparations began quietly. The engineers gathered supplies, food packs, water filters, emergency medical tools. Alara packed little. She had left the palace with nothing but her children, and she did not need more. She wrapped them in layered blankets designed for space travel, adjusting the fabric carefully around their small bodies. As the time for departure approached, Alara felt a strange calm. Fear still existed, but it no longer controlled her. Each step she took now had purpose. She looked back once at the underground chamber, at the people who had helped her without asking for anything in return. She thanked them with sincerity, knowing words were not enough. The shuttle doors sealed with a soft sound. Alara secured the children in the safety cradle and took the pilot seat. The controls lit up slowly, responding to her touch. She had trained on similar systems before, but never under such conditions. Still, her hands were steady. The launch was quiet, almost gentle. The shuttle moved through hidden tunnels, then upward, toward the surface. Alara watched the displays carefully. Signals flickered around them, but none locked on. The city above was still distracted by its own crisis. When the shuttle broke through the atmosphere, stars filled the view. Alara felt her breath catch. She had seen the stars from palace balconies, but this was different. This was movement, escape, possibility. Her children slept peacefully behind her, unaware that their lives had already changed forever. The planet slowly fell away beneath them, a blue and silver curve against the darkness. Alara whispered a farewell, not to the palace, but to the past. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also hope. Humanity had always survived by moving forward, by adapting, by refusing to give up. The shuttle moved silently through the dark, its engines humming with a steady rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. Princess Alara sat in the pilot's seat, her eyes shifting between the star-filled view ahead and the soft glow of the control panels. Every system report mattered now. Fuel levels, life support, navigation. She checked them again and again, not from fear but from care. The lives behind her depended on each quiet number staying within safe limits. Her children slept in the cradle, wrapped securely. Their faces were peaceful, untouched by the chaos they had escaped. Alara watched them through the reflection in the glass, letting their calm settle her thoughts. Space was vast and unfamiliar, but it was also clean and honest. There were no hidden halls here, no secrets behind walls, only distance and the chance to choose a new path. The shuttle passed the edge of a nebula, its colors slow and gentle like drifting clouds. Sensors flickered as particles brushed the hull, but the craft held steady. Alara adjusted course with careful movements. She had studied navigation as theory, but practice was different. Still, her mind adapted quickly. Humans had always learned fastest when survival demanded it. Hours passed, measured only by system cycles. Alara used the time to review the data the engineers had loaded into the shuttle: star charts, old colony records, emergency contact points. One location stood out: a distant world listed as stable, fertile, and quiet. It was far from major trade routes, far from political centers. The perfect place to disappear, at least for a while. As the shuttle aligned for a long jump, warning lights briefly flashed. Alara's heart tightened, but she forced herself to stay calm. She ran diagnostics, tracing the issue to minor interference. She corrected it manually, her fingers steady. When the lights faded, she released a slow breath. Every small success strengthened her confidence. During a rest cycle, Alara unfastened herself and moved to the cradle. The children stirred as she adjusted their blankets. One of them reached out, tiny fingers wrapping around hers. The simple contact grounded her more than anything else. She whispered softly, telling them about the stars, about how humans had once looked up and dreamed of reaching them. Now they were traveling through those dreams. The shuttle entered faster travel, and the stars stretched into lines of light. Alara returned to her seat, eyes focused forward. Time lost meaning in that state, but eventually the sensors signaled the approach to their destination system. The long journey was ending. As the stars returned to their normal shape, a planet appeared ahead. Green and blue, wrapped in thin clouds, it looked alive and welcoming. Alara felt a weight lift from her chest. She had made the right choice. The shuttle descended carefully, scanning for safe landing zones. Vast forests covered much of the surface, broken by rivers that reflected sunlight like silver threads. She guided the shuttle toward a clearing near a water source. The landing was smooth, the ground firm beneath the craft. When the engines powered down, silence filled the cabin. Not the empty silence of space, but the gentle quiet of a living world. Alara opened the hatch and fresh air rushed inside. It smelled of plants and soil, rich and real. She stepped out carefully, holding her children close. Warm light filtered through tall trees and distant sounds echoed softly. Birds, insects, life. The world did not feel hostile. It felt patient. Soon, figures emerged from the trees. Humans dressed in practical clothing, carrying tools instead of weapons. They approached slowly, curiosity clear on their faces. Alara held her ground, meeting them with open posture. When she spoke, her voice was calm and honest. She explained who she was and why she had come. The settlers listened without interruption. They had left crowded worlds long ago to build something simpler, something fair. They understood the need to protect children, to start fresh. After a quiet exchange, they welcomed her. Shelter was offered, food shared. Alara felt gratitude deepen within her. Humanity, she realized, did not need palaces to be noble. It needed people willing to help each other in quiet moments. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the land, Alara stood outside a simple dwelling, her children in her arms. The journey had taken everything she knew and reshaped it. She was no longer running. She was arriving. Morning came softly on the new world. Light filtered through the tall trees and painted gentle patterns across the ground. Princess Alara woke to the sound of unfamiliar birds calling to one another. For a moment, she simply listened. There were no alarms, no distant sirens, no echo of fire. Only life moving at its own calm pace. Her children slept beside her, wrapped in simple blankets made by the settlers. Their breathing was slow and even. Alara watched them, feeling a deep sense of relief. They were safe, at least for now. She rose quietly and stepped outside the dwelling. Cool air brushed her face, and the scent of damp earth filled her lungs. Each breath felt like a gift. The settlers were already awake, moving through their routines. Some tended to crops grown in carefully cleared spaces, others checked water systems and solar collectors. Their colony was small but well organized. Everything had a purpose, nothing wasted. Alara admired their efficiency. It reminded her that humanity could thrive without grand buildings or endless technology, as long as people worked together. A woman from the settlement greeted Alara with a warm smile and offered her a simple meal. As they ate, they spoke about the world, about how the settlers had arrived years ago seeking distance from crowded systems and constant conflict. They had learned to live in balance with the land, taking only what they needed. Alara listened carefully, absorbing every word. This place was not just a hiding spot. It was a lesson. Later, Alara joined a small group exploring the nearby forest. She carried one of her children while the other rested with caretakers. Walking beneath the tall trees, she felt small but not weak. The settlers explained which plants were safe, how they monitored weather patterns, and how they communicated with other distant colonies using low-profile signals. Nothing here was flashy, but everything worked. As the day passed, Alara began to help. She assisted in repairing a water filter, using knowledge she had learned during her education. The settlers noticed her skill and welcomed her contributions. She was no longer treated as a guest alone, but as someone who belonged. That feeling surprised her. For the first time since the palace burned, she felt useful beyond survival. In quiet moments, her thoughts returned to the past. She wondered what was happening on her home planet. She wondered if the fire had achieved its purpose, if those behind it believed they had won. The questions did not bring anger. Instead, they brought clarity. She could not stay hidden forever. One day, her children would ask where they came from. She wanted to have an answer that included hope. That evening, Alara gathered with the settlers around a shared fire used only for warmth and light. Stories were exchanged. Some spoke of failed colonies, others of unexpected success. Alara shared parts of her own journey, careful but honest. She did not speak of revenge or reclaiming power. She spoke of responsibility, of protecting life, of building something better. The settlers listened thoughtfully. One of them spoke of old human traditions, where leadership was earned through service rather than birth. The idea stayed with Alara. She had been born a princess, trained for leadership, but this experience was shaping her in new ways. Perhaps true leadership was not about ruling, but about guiding and learning alongside others. As night fell, stars filled the sky brighter than she had ever seen from the palace. With no city lights to dim them, they seemed close enough to touch. Alara stood outside with her children, pointing upward and whispering stories about explorers who crossed great distances guided by nothing but curiosity and courage. The babies did not understand the words, but they felt the calm in her voice. Before resting, Alara spent time reviewing the shuttle's systems again. It remained hidden and functional, a bridge between worlds. She updated navigation logs and stored data from the colony. She did not know when they would need to leave again, but she believed in being prepared. Survival had taught her that readiness was a form of respect for life. As she lay down that night, Alara felt a quiet strength growing within her. She was learning, adapting, becoming something more than she had been. The fire had taken her palace, but it had not taken her purpose. In this quiet world, among people who valued cooperation and care, she was beginning to see a path forward. Her children slept peacefully, surrounded by safety and new possibilities. Alara closed her eyes, knowing that the journey was far from over. But for the first time, she was not running from danger. She was preparing for the future. And in that preparation, the spirit of humanity shone brighter than any palace ever had. Days passed gently on the forest world, measured by rising light and cooling evenings. Princess Alara settled into a rhythm she had never known before. Each morning, she helped with tasks that kept the colony alive. She learned how water was purified from the river, how energy was stored during bright hours, and how crops were protected from sudden storms. Every system depended on care and attention, and she respected that balance. Her children grew calmer with each passing day. They slept well, laughed easily, and reached toward everything with curiosity. The settlers took turns watching them, treating them as part of the community rather than visitors. Alara saw how naturally trust formed when people shared responsibility. It reminded her of something long forgotten in palace life, where walls and ranks often replaced connection. One afternoon, a quiet signal arrived through the colony's communication array. It was faint and carefully coded, but unmistakably human. Alara was present when the message was decoded. It carried news from nearby systems. The political situation on her home planet had shifted. Power was unstable. Information was tightly controlled. No one mentioned the princess or her children. To the wider galaxy, they were believed lost. The room remained silent after the message ended. Alara felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Being unseen had kept them safe, but it also meant her people believed she was gone forever. She thanked the settlers for sharing the information openly. Transparency, she had learned, built strength rather than fear. That evening, Alara walked alone near the river while the children slept. The water moved steadily, shaping stone over time without force. She realized she was changing in the same way. Slowly, patiently, becoming something stronger through experience rather than command. Still, she knew she could not remain apart forever. Her children deserved to grow up knowing their history, not as a burden but as understanding. She returned to the settlement and spoke with the elders. They listened carefully as she explained her thoughts. She did not ask for weapons or soldiers. She asked for knowledge. She wanted to learn more about diplomacy beyond royal courts, about communication between colonies, about how ideas could travel farther than authority. The elders agreed. They believed information was humanity's most powerful tool. Training began quietly. Alara studied old records of interstellar cooperation, moments when humans had overcome division through shared purpose. She practiced transmitting messages that carried clarity and truth without revealing locations. She learned how trust networks formed across distance, connecting people who believed in stability and care. At the same time, she trained her body, not for battle but for endurance. She learned how to travel long distances on foot, how to respond calmly to emergencies, how to remain clear-minded under stress. The settlers encouraged her, impressed by her dedication. She did not train as a ruler reclaiming power, but as a guardian preparing for uncertainty. One night the sky changed. Sensors detected unusual movement at the edge of the system. Nothing hostile, just unfamiliar. Alara felt the old tension return, but she did not panic. She worked with the settlers to adjust signal dampeners and review evacuation plans. Preparation brought calm. Whatever came, they would face it together. The movement passed without incident, but it reminded Alara that isolation was never permanent. The galaxy was alive, always shifting. She realized that one day others would find this world. When that happened, the colony needed to be ready, not hidden in fear, but confident in who they were. She began recording messages for her children, not instructions but stories. She spoke of the palace not as a place of loss, but as a place of learning. She spoke of the fire as a turning point, not an end. She spoke of humanity's ability to rebuild, to choose cooperation over control. She wanted her children to grow up understanding that strength came from care and curiosity. Weeks later, another message arrived, clearer this time. It spoke of growing unrest calming, of leaders seeking legitimacy through unity rather than fear. Alara felt hope stir. Change was possible without force. It always had been. She stood beneath the stars that night, holding her children, and felt the future stretching wide before them. She did not know when she would return to the wider galaxy, or what role she would play. But she knew she would not return as the same person who had fled the burning palace. She was becoming something new, a bridge between worlds, a reminder that humanity survived not because it conquered, but because it learned, adapted, and cared. And wherever her path led next, she would walk it with purpose, carrying not fear into the night, but light. The forest world changed with the seasons, though the shifts were gentle and slow. Princess Alara learned to read those changes the way the settlers did. She noticed how the air grew cooler at night, how the leaves deepened in color, how the animals adjusted their patterns. Life here moved with quiet wisdom, and she felt herself moving with it. Her children grew stronger and more curious. They crawled, then walked, their laughter echoing through the settlement. Alara watched them explore with wonder, touching soil, water, and light as if discovering the universe for the first time. The settlers smiled at their energy. In their joy, Alara saw the future she had fought to protect. Communication training continued. Alara now helped manage message relays between distant human colonies. She did not speak as a princess, but as a trusted voice shaped by experience. Her words focused on cooperation, shared knowledge, and peaceful growth. Slowly, more colonies responded, not with allegiance but with respect. One afternoon, a long-range message arrived carrying a familiar symbol. It was from her home system. The message did not mention names, but its meaning was clear. There were efforts to rebuild, to heal divisions left behind by fear and secrecy. There was uncertainty, but also openness. Alara felt a steady calm rather than urgency. Time was finally working with her, not against her. She gathered the settlers and shared the news. Together, they discussed what it meant. Some worried about attention being drawn to their world. Others saw opportunity. Alara listened carefully. She had learned that leadership meant weighing every voice. In the end, they agreed to remain cautious but not silent. They would engage slowly on their own terms. That night, Alara walked to the shuttle and powered it on briefly, running system checks. The craft was still ready. She placed her hand on the console, feeling its familiar hum. Leaving again would be hard, but she knew she would not always stay. The galaxy was opening, and she would one day step into it with intention. Her children joined her, toddling across the ground and reaching toward the stars. She lifted them gently and spoke of journeys, not as escapes, but as choices. They listened without understanding the words, but they felt the meaning in her voice. In the following weeks, visitors arrived. Small exploration teams from nearby colonies, guided by Alara's messages. They came openly, respectfully, and were welcomed. Knowledge was exchanged. Seeds, tools, and ideas flowed freely. The settlement grew not in size, but in connection. Alara observed how quickly trust could form when honesty led the way. Humans, she realized, were at their best when they shared rather than claimed. The idea filled her with quiet pride. This was the spirit she wanted her children to inherit. One evening, as the stars brightened the sky, Alara received a personal message. This one spoke directly to her, using her name with care. It came from a council forming on her home planet. They did not ask her to return. They asked if she was alive, if her children were safe. The simplicity of the questions moved her deeply. She did not respond immediately. Instead, she sat with the settlers, her children asleep beside her, and thought. The fire had taught her that power taken through fear never lasted. What mattered now was trust, built slowly and openly. When she finally replied, her message was simple. She was alive. Her children were safe. She spoke of learning, of community, of hope. She did not promise a return, only continued communication. It was enough. The response came hours later, filled with relief and gratitude. Alara felt a chapter close quietly. She had not reclaimed a throne, but she had reclaimed her voice. As seasons turned again, Alara stood at the edge of the forest, watching light filter through leaves. Her children played nearby, surrounded by laughter and care. The galaxy no longer felt distant or dangerous. It felt wide and full of possibility. She knew challenges would come. They always did. But she also knew humanity would meet them the same way it always had, with patience, with creativity, with compassion. The night sky shimmered above not as a threat but as an invitation. And Princess Alara, no longer defined by the palace she fled, smiled softly. She was ready for whatever the stars would bring next. The new season brought steady rain to the forest world, gentle and nourishing. Princess Alara watched droplets fall from the tall leaves, feeding the soil and filling the streams. The settlers welcomed the change, adjusting their routines with ease. Alara admired how naturally they adapted. It reminded her again that survival was not about control but understanding. Her children loved the rain. They laughed as cool drops touched their hands, trying to catch the falling water. Alara joined them, letting the rain wash over her. In moments like this, the past felt distant. The fire, the palace, the fear all seemed like another lifetime. Yet she knew those memories still shaped her choices. Communication with other colonies increased. Alara spent many hours coordinating messages, helping resolve misunderstandings and sharing solutions learned from the forest world. Small problems were solved before they became larger ones. Trust grew not because of authority, but because her words carried honesty. People listened. One day, a message arrived that changed the tone of everything. A group from her home system requested a meeting in neutral space. Not a demand, not a command, an invitation. They wanted to learn from her experience and from the settlement that had sheltered her. Alara read the message several times. She felt no fear, only responsibility. She gathered the settlers to discuss the request. The conversation was long and careful. Some worried that exposure would bring attention and risk. Others believed that staying silent would slow progress. Alara did not push her opinion. She waited, listened, and reflected. In the end, the decision was made together. A small delegation would go, peacefully, openly. Preparations began, measured and thoughtful. The shuttle was upgraded with shared knowledge from visiting colonies, not to make it stronger but safer. Navigation systems were refined. Communication encryption was adjusted to protect privacy without secrecy. Every choice reflected trust balanced with caution. When the time came, Alara boarded the shuttle with her children. A few settlers joined her, chosen for their wisdom rather than rank. As the craft lifted into the sky, Alara looked down at the forest world that had become home. She did not feel loss. She felt connection. Home, she had learned, could exist in more than one place. The journey to the meeting point was calm. Space felt familiar now, no longer cold or empty. It was simply another environment humanity had learned to navigate. Alara reviewed her thoughts not as a speech but as understanding. She did not intend to argue or command. She intended to share. The meeting took place aboard a large station, neutral and simple in design. Representatives from several systems were present. Faces showed curiosity, caution, and hope. When Alara entered, carrying one child while the other rested close by, the room grew quiet. Not from fear, but respect. She spoke calmly. She told them about the fire without assigning blame. She spoke of survival, of help given freely, of communities built on trust. She spoke of her children and what kind of galaxy she wanted them to inherit. Her words were not dramatic. They were clear and human. Questions followed. She answered honestly, even when the answers were uncertain. She admitted fear, mistakes, and learning. That honesty changed the room. The discussion shifted from politics to possibilities, from control to cooperation. By the end of the meeting, no agreements were signed, no titles exchanged, but something more important had formed: understanding, a shared vision of stability built through communication rather than force. As Alara returned to the shuttle, she felt lighter. The galaxy was listening, not because she was a princess, but because she spoke as a mother, a survivor, and a human. When they returned to the forest world, the settlers welcomed them warmly. News of the meeting spread slowly, carefully. The future was still uncertain, but it felt brighter. That night, Alara stood beneath the rain-softened stars, her children asleep in her arms. She had not reclaimed the past. She had helped shape what came next. Humanity's strength, she knew now, was not in palaces or power, but in the courage to choose understanding. And as the rain fell quietly around her, Alara felt ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. News from the meeting traveled slowly through human space, carried by careful messages and shared experiences rather than loud announcements. Princess Alara returned to her quiet routines on the forest world, but she could feel the change in the air. People spoke with more confidence. Colonies that had once avoided contact now reached out, asking questions, sharing concerns, offering ideas. Humanity was beginning to talk to itself again. Alara focused on her children as they grew. They were stronger now, curious and thoughtful, already showing different personalities. One loved to sit quietly and watch the world, while the other wanted to touch everything and ask endless questions. Alara encouraged both. She believed humanity needed dreamers and observers equally. Education became an important part of daily life. The settlers and visiting specialists taught the children together not just facts but values, cooperation, responsibility, curiosity. Alara joined these lessons, learning alongside them. She wanted her children to see that learning never ended, no matter who you were. Another message arrived from her home system, clearer than before. Reconstruction was underway. Old structures were being replaced, not just buildings but systems of leadership. Councils were forming that included voices once ignored. The palace ruins were being cleared not to rebuild the past but to make space for something new. Alara felt a deep, quiet pride. Change had come without force. A question followed the update. Would she consider returning not as a ruler but as a witness to what had been learned beyond their world? The message carried no urgency, only respect. Alara took time to think. She walked through the forest, listened to the river, watched her children play. The answer did not come quickly, but it came clearly. She gathered the settlers and shared the message. Once again, decisions were made together. They spoke openly about risk and meaning. In the end, they agreed. Alara would return briefly, openly, and on her own terms. Not to reclaim a throne, but to help guide a transition shaped by understanding. Preparations were careful and calm. The shuttle was checked and rechecked. Supplies were prepared not for escape, but for comfort. Alara recorded messages for the settlers, thanking them for what they had given her and promising continued connection. The forest world would always be part of her story. The journey back felt different from the first escape. There was no fear pushing her forward, only purpose pulling her home. Space seemed less empty now, filled with invisible threads of communication and trust. Her children watched the stars, asking questions that made Alara smile. She answered honestly, even when the truth was uncertain. When the shuttle approached her home planet, Alara saw the changes immediately. The glow of the city was softer, less rigid. Traffic patterns were open, welcoming rather than guarded. There were no banners of power, only symbols of rebuilding. She felt a tightness in her chest, not from fear but from emotion. The landing area was simple. No grand ceremony waited. A small group stood ready, representing different parts of society. They greeted her not with titles but with thanks. Alara stepped forward, holding her children, and felt something settle into place. This was how it should have always been. She walked through familiar streets that now felt different, open, human. People recognized her, but they did not stare. They nodded, smiled, returned to their work. Life was continuing, not frozen around her presence. That mattered more than any honor. Alara spoke to councils, schools, and community groups. She shared stories, not instructions. She spoke of the forest world, of shared effort, of mistakes made and lessons learned. She spoke of choosing patience over fear. Her words spread quietly, carried by people who believed in them. When her visit ended, she returned to the shuttle without regret. She had not stayed to rule. She had stayed to connect. That was enough. As the planet faded behind them, Alara looked at her children and felt peace. They had seen where they came from, and they knew they could leave again. They belonged to more than one world, and that made them stronger. Ahead, the stars waited, familiar and welcoming. Humanity was still imperfect, still learning. But it was moving forward, step by step, choosing understanding over destruction. Princess Alara leaned back as the shuttle entered the quiet dark. She was no longer fleeing the night. She was traveling through it, carrying hope with her, confident that wherever humans went next, they would endure together. The forest world welcomed Princess Alara back with familiar sounds and gentle light. The settlers gathered as the shuttle landed, their faces calm and warm. There was no celebration, no speeches, just quiet understanding. Alara stepped onto the soil with her children in her arms and felt complete. She had gone back to the past and returned without being trapped by it. Life settled into a new balance. The colony was no longer hidden, but it was not exposed either. Communication with other human worlds flowed steadily, guided by trust rather than authority. Ideas were exchanged freely. When problems arose, they were discussed openly. Alara helped where she could, not as a ruler, but as someone who had seen what fear could do and what cooperation could heal. Her children grew quickly, surrounded by many teachers and many stories. They learned about stars and soil, history and hope. They knew about the palace fire, but it was told not as a tragedy, but as the beginning of a long journey. They understood that loss could lead to growth, and that courage did not always look like strength. Sometimes it looked like listening. Alara often walked with them near the river at sunset. The water reflected the sky in colors of gold and blue. She spoke to them about responsibility, not as a burden but as care for others. She taught them that humanity survived not by standing above the world, but by becoming part of it. Over time, the influence of the forest world spread quietly. Other colonies adopted similar ways of living, not copying but adapting. Smaller communities formed, connected through shared values rather than strict control. Humanity did not become perfect, but it became more thoughtful. That was enough. One evening, Alara received a message from her home planet. The old palace grounds had been transformed into a public space filled with gardens and learning centers. Children played where walls once stood. Knowledge was shared where power had once been guarded. Alara smiled when she saw the images. The fire had cleared space for something better. She shared the message with the settlers and her children. They listened with interest but without longing. They knew they could visit if they wished. They also knew they were home where they stood. That understanding filled Alara with quiet pride. As the years passed, Alara felt herself becoming less defined by her past title. She was known simply as Alara, a traveler, a mother, a voice people trusted. When younger settlers asked her how she had survived the night she fled the palace, she answered honestly. She said she survived because she was not alone, because she accepted help, and because she believed the future was worth protecting. On a clear night, Alara stood beneath the stars with her grown children beside her. The sky stretched endlessly, filled with distant lights. She remembered the first time she had seen the stars from the shuttle, frightened and uncertain. Now, she felt only calm. The galaxy was still vast and unpredictable, but humanity had learned how to face it together. Her children spoke of journeys they might take one day, worlds they wanted to see, people they wanted to help. Alara listened, knowing she had done what she set out to do. She had given them not a throne, but a sense of belonging everywhere. As night deepened, the forest whispered with life. Alara looked out into the darkness, no longer afraid of it. The night had once been something she fled into, carrying her babies away from fire and loss. Now it was simply part of the universe, full of possibility. Humanity would continue to face challenges. There would be mistakes and hardships ahead, but there would also be kindness, curiosity, and courage. Alara had seen all of it, lived through it, and helped shape what came next. She rested her hands on her children's shoulders and smiled softly. The palace was gone, but something stronger had taken its place. A future built not on fear, but on understanding. And as the stars watched quietly, Princess Alara, once fleeing into the night, stood ready for whatever tomorrow would bring, knowing that humanity's greatest strength had always been its heart.